Red Vista, New Mexico Territory, 1887. Night had settled hard over the one-street town, pushing the cold down into the cracks of the boardwalk. Inside the Lone Cactus Saloon, the lamps burned low and yellow, turning smoke into a heavy fog that clung to every breath. Men laughed too loud over cheap whiskey and crooked cards, trying to forget the dust waiting outside. In the middle of it all, a woman in a torn blue dress dropped to her knees, one hand pressed to her cheek, the other reaching for a scrap of paper on the table. She had told herself there was nothing left they could take from her, until tonight proved her wrong. Nora Finch tasted blood when she spoke. "I'm not for sale." No one slowed their drinking for that. Caleb Dorsey yanked her back by the arm like she weighed nothing. His shirt was stained, his beard wet with spilled whiskey, his eyes glassy and mean. The room smelled of him, sour sweat, liquor, and something ugly that never washed off. "Paper says different," he slurred, shoving her toward the table again. "Get up, Nora. Show a little gratitude." On the felt in front of Warren Pike, the town's gambler and quiet owner of too many things, lay a folded note with ink still fresh in places. Warren smoothed it with 2 careful fingers, his rings clicking softly on the wood. He didn't look at Nora. He looked at the numbers. House, contents, and labor. Signed Nora Finch, widow of Thomas Finch. Witnessed at the office of Sheriff Miles Harlan. He let the paper go. It curled at the edges like it wanted to crawl away. Rate, slow. "That's what we have here." Nora lunged for it anyway. Caleb laughed and stuck out a boot, sending her shoulder first into the table. Cards scattered. Whiskey sloshed. Curses flew. "Sit down, woman," someone barked. She pushed herself up, vision swimming, the faces blurred. Only the white oval of the paper stayed sharp. "That's my name," she said hoarsely. "My hand on that ink, but I didn't know." Caleb's palm cracked across her cheek. The sound cut the saloon clean in half. "You knew I'd make it right," he growled. "Tommy died owing. I took care of that. You ought to be thanking me." She turned to Warren instead. "You can't own a person." At last, he looked at her. Pale eyes, sharp, tired of being surprised by anything. "I can own a debt," he said. "Out here, well, that's close enough." Laughter rolled slow around them. A chair scraped. The piano stumbled into a bright tune no one believed. Caleb grabbed her again, his fingers digging deep into the bruises on her arm. "Come on, girl. You heard the man." "You're working it off." Nora's voice cracked. "Please, don't do this. I'll find another way." Caleb leaned close enough she could smell the rot on his breath. "You don't have another way, Nora. You got a dress, a face, and 2 hands. And now you got work." She bit her lip to keep from shaking apart. Around her, men watched with the dull interest of folks who had seen worse, or told themselves they had. Warren tapped the paper with his ring. "It's done. The ink's dry. Sheriff signed it. Makes it clean." Nothing about Caleb's eyes felt clean. Nora tried once more. "Sheriff said it was just to keep a roof over me." "And it will," Warren replied. "A roof over the bunkhouse, A roof over the workrooms. I don't care which, so long as the debt comes down. She searched the room, looking for one kind eye. All she found was the way they avoided her. Caleb tightened his grip on her jaw. You fight me in front of folks again, and I'll teach you some manners you won't forget. He pulled his fist back, slow and heavy. Nora's heart hammered like it wanted out of her chest. Something inside her whispered anyway. I'm not yours. Not now. Not ever. Caleb didn't stop. Warren spoke mildly over the piano's weak notes. Out here, ink weighs more than tears. That's when the saloon doors blew open. Cold night wind rushed in, tasting of dust and sage. The lamps trembled, cards fluttered, every head turned. A man stood in the doorway. Tall enough his hat brushed the lintel, his coat powdered with red trail dust. He didn't move. The light carved him into a dark shape, his shadow stretching all the way to where Nora knelt. Caleb's fist hung in the air. Nora didn't know the man's name, didn't know why seeing him made her breath catch. All she knew was this. For the first time that night, someone was looking at her like she mattered. The man in the doorway didn't rush, didn't speak, didn't reach for his gun. He just stood there a moment, letting the noise of the saloon fall around him like dust settling after a long ride. His hat shadowed his eyes, but the room felt smaller with him in it. Even Caleb paused, fist hovering inches from Nora's face. Isaiah Cole stepped forward. The lamps caught the trail-worn edges of his coat, the dull brass of his belt buckle, the faint scorch mark on his left sleeve. Signs of a man who'd been too close to too many kinds of fire. He wasn't from Red Vista. That much the room knew at a glance. But something in his walk said he'd seen harsher places than this saloon, and lived through them anyway. He looked at Nora first. A quiet look, a steady one. Long enough for her breath to shake. Then he looked at Caleb. That's enough. Just those two words, low and calm, but they carried more weight than any shout. Caleb barked a laugh, though it faltered halfway. Who the hell? Isaiah didn't answer. He reached out and caught Caleb's wrist in midair. The motion was simple, but it changed everything. Caleb's arm stopped like it had hit a wall. His knuckles whitened. His breath stuttered. A hush slid across the saloon as every drunk, every gambler, every bystander pulled their hands back from whatever they were doing. Nora stared at the dark hand locked around Caleb's wrist. The strength in it, but also the control. No trembling, no hesitation. Just a firm, quiet refusal. Isaiah's voice stayed even. A drunk man's hand doesn't get to land on a woman. Not tonight. Caleb twisted, trying to break free. Didn't work. He tried using his weight. Didn't work either. Isaiah held him with the ease of a man who'd held back worse things. Stampeding horses, panicked cattle, men with real hate in their eyes. He's right, Caleb, someone muttered. Someone else snorted nervously. But the only voice that mattered came from behind the bar. Warren Pike drawled, Well now, Looks like we have ourselves a hero. Isaiah didn't look his way. Not a hero, he said quietly. Just a man who knows when to stop something ugly. Warren lifted the paper on the table. This something ugly belongs to me, Mr. Isaiah released Caleb at last. Caleb stumbled back, rubbing his wrist, glaring, but not daring to swing again. Cole, he said. Isaiah Cole. The name sent a small ripple through the room. A black rancher with land was rare in this territory. A black rancher known for not bending to certain kinds of men was rarer still. Warren nodded slow. Heard your place survived that fire up on the North Ridge. Shame about what it cost you. Isaiah's jaw tightened. Just slightly. But Nora saw it. Something old and raw flickered in his eyes. He ignored the bait. The woman leaves with me. A few men coughed, unsure whether to laugh or hold their tongues. Caleb snapped, "She ain't yours, cowboy." Isaiah stepped between them, planting himself like a living wall. "She's not yours either." Warren tapped the paper. "Law says otherwise." Isaiah's gaze dropped to the signature. Miles Harlan. The sheriff who once let a mob burn half of Coal Hollow's grazing fields. The sheriff who dismissed Isaiah's report when his little sister went missing, saying, "Some folks just disappear." Isaiah breathed once, slow, steady. "Sheriff signs a lot of things," he said. "Doesn't make them right." Warren chuckled. "Right doesn't matter. Ink does." Isaiah looked at him then, really looked, and for the first time, Warren shifted under another man's stare. "Ink fades," Isaiah said softly. "Bruises don't." Nora clutched her arm without meaning to. Something inside her broke loose. Something she'd been holding down for years. Warren snapped, "Nora, you'll go with Caleb. We'll settle the rest tomorrow." Isaiah reached down, offering his hand. He didn't touch her. He just kept it open. "You come with me, if you want to leave this room." Nora hesitated, not because she doubted him, but because she had forgotten what choosing felt like. Caleb lunged. Isaiah moved faster. He shoved Caleb back into a table. Glass shattered. Men jumped aside. The piano clanged. "Try that again," Isaiah warned, "and you won't get back up." The saloon went still. Outside, boots crunched on gravel. Lamps flickered as someone approached the doorway Isaiah had walked through moments earlier. A familiar voice wrapped the room in cold iron. "Cole, we keep running into each other, don't we?" Nora stiffened. Sheriff Miles Harlan stood in the entrance, badge gleaming, coat unbuttoned, hand resting lightly on his gun. Isaiah didn't turn. "Sheriff?" Harlan stepped inside, eyes gliding over the broken glass. The silence, Caleb's bruised pride, then settling on Nora. "Well," he murmured, "looks like you've stirred up a fine mess." Then his gaze moved to Isaiah. "And I see you're still choosing trouble over peace." Isaiah finally turned, slow and deliberate. "Sometimes peace comes at too high a price." Nora felt her pulse throb in her throat as Harlan's mouth curved into a thin, knowing smile, one that carried history she didn't understand. but Isaiah clearly did. And for the first time since the night began, fear shifted into something else. A sense that this wasn't just her fight anymore. There was a past in the room now, rising like smoke, and none of them were walking out untouched. Sheriff Miles Harlan took another step into the lone cactus, letting the door swing shut behind him. The hinges groaned, like something old and half-broken. The air shifted again, heavier now, colder, even though the room was warm with whiskey breath and lamplight. Harlan's boots thudded slow across the floorboards, each one measured, each one reminding every man present who enforced the rules here. His eyes swept over Nora, then Caleb, then the jagged mess of broken glass. Finally, they landed on Isaiah. "Didn't expect to see you back in Red Vista," Harlan said. "Thought you learned your lesson about picking sides in this town." Isaiah didn't blink. Some lessons deserve to be unlearned. Harlan smirked, a slice of amusement no one else in the room shared. "Well now," he said, reaching for the folded paper on Warren's table. "Let's see what's worth all the excitement." Warren handed it over without a word. Harlan opened it carefully, like it was something sacred, not a weapon dressed in ink. His eyes moved down the page. When he spoke, his voice was smooth, too smooth. "Debt agreement. Witnessed and verified." He tapped the sheriff's signature. "Everything looks proper." Nora flinched. The word proper felt like another slap. Isaiah stepped forward, not threatening, just firm. She didn't understand what she was signing. Harlan didn't look up. Understanding isn't required. Agreement is. "She was coerced," Isaiah said. Harlan lifted his gaze, slowly, until his cold gray eyes met Isaiah's. "You weren't there," he said. "You don't know what she felt." Isaiah's answer came quiet and sharp. "I know fear when I see it." Caleb barked out a laugh. "She's always scared of something." Isaiah's jaw tightened. Nora felt something climb up her chest. Shame, anger, and something else she hadn't felt in years. Harlan folded the paper neatly, his movements precise, practiced. "The law is simple," he said. "This woman owes. The man she owed is dead. Debt passes to the hand that pays it." He tucked the paper into his coat. "And in this case, that's Warren Pike." Nora's voice cracked. "Sheriff, you told me it was to protect my home. You said it wouldn't bind me like property." Harlan lifted one shoulder, a slow shrug. "Times change. Circumstances change." Isaiah's voice softened. "People change too." Harlan smiled cold. "Not as often as you think." Warren stepped beside him, arms folded. "We've got business here, Sheriff. Mr. Cole is interfering with it." Harlan tilted his head, studying Isaiah like a man sizing up a horse he might want to break. "You planning to challenge a legal document, Cole? Over a woman you met 5 minutes ago?" Isaiah didn't flinch. "I'm challenging the way you use the law." Caleb spat a curse. Someone muttered, "He's gonna get himself shot." The piano player slid his hands off the keys. Isaiah stepped again, shielding Nora with his body. Law isn't a club you beat people with when they're already down. Something flickered in Harlan's eyes. Annoyance, memory, or recognition. You forget your place, Harlan said. Isaiah's voice dropped lower, rougher. I stopped having one the day you refused to look for my sister. The room froze. Nora felt the words like cold iron sliding between her ribs. She didn't know the story, but she could read it in the tension of Isaiah's shoulders. Harlan sighed, bored. Your sister chose her path, not my responsibility. Isaiah's fingers curled. Your signature is on every bad thing in this town, he said, including that paper. Harlan stepped closer, until a single breath lay between them. That signature keeps order, he said. Without it, this town burns. Isaiah didn't move. Maybe it needs to. Warren shifted. Caleb swallowed. Nora pressed a hand to her chest, torn between fear for Isaiah and fear of him stepping aside. Harlan sighed again. Enough. This ends tonight. I'll allow you, he nodded at Isaiah, to take her out of here. But she reports to my office tomorrow at dawn. And you, Cole, you come too. Isaiah narrowed his eyes. For what? Harlan's answer slid out like a knife. To settle this properly. Debt or payment. No third option. Warren smiled thinly. Caleb sneered. Nora felt her knees weaken. Isaiah turned to her. Can you stand? She nodded, though she wasn't sure she could. He helped her up, his hand warm, steady, a kind of steadiness she hadn't felt in years. As they moved toward the door, Nora whispered, You shouldn't have done that. You don't even know me. Isaiah kept his eyes forward. I knew enough. Outside, the night wind carried the metallic scent of dust and the faint clang of a distant church bell. A few steps behind them, unnoticed in the dark, a thin shadow slipped from the saloon wall. A man following. A man who didn't need ink or law to hurt people. And he wasn't planning to wait for dawn. The wheels of Isaiah's wagon creaked through the quiet outskirts of Red Vista, carrying them away from the lamplight, away from the voices, away from the weight of too many eyes. The night was cold enough that Nora pulled the thin blanket tighter around her shoulders. Dust rose behind them in long, pale ribbons, trailing out into the dark like something trying to follow. Isaiah didn't speak at first. He held the reins with a steady grip, his posture fixed and calm, though Nora could see the tightness in his jaw whenever the wind shifted and caught his face. A man who'd endured more than he ever said aloud. The moon hung low over the valley, brushing faint silver over the rugged land. It felt larger out here, emptier, lonelier. But the farther they rode, the more the tension in her chest began to loosen, like a knot pulled too tight, finally remembering how to breathe. You cold? Isaiah asked quietly. She opened her mouth to say no, but the truth slipped out instead. A little. He loosened the coat draped beside him and handed it over. She hesitated, then accepted it. The coat was warm, still carrying the faint smell of horses, cedar, and dust, comforting in a way she hadn't expected. "You don't have to be afraid," he said. "I'm not afraid of you," she replied. He nodded, as if that were enough. They rode in silence until the outline of a small ranch appeared ahead. Coal Hollow. The windows glowed faintly, a soft, warm light standing stubborn against the wide dark. Nora stared at it longer than she meant to. She didn't remember the last time a window's light belonged to safety instead of warning. Isaiah helped her down from the wagon. His hands were rough, but careful. Inside, the cabin was simple. Rough plank walls, a low wooden table with 2 chairs, an old trunk by the hearth. Everything worn, but clean. Lived in, cared for, and quiet. Not the harsh quiet of fear, but the kind that settles like dust on a long trail. Soft, unintrusive. "I can make up a place for you near the fire," Isaiah said, kneeling to stir the coals. Sparks flared up, warm gold against the cool air. "You'll be safer here tonight." The word safer caught in her throat. She hadn't heard it directed at her in years. She sat slowly on the chair nearest the light. The warmth seeped into her bruised arms, her stiff fingers. "You said earlier," she murmured, "that you knew enough. What did you mean?" Isaiah paused, the iron poker halfway through the embers. His expression didn't change, but something in his shoulders softened. "I know what it looks like when someone is cornered," he said, "and when someone has stopped fighting because there's no point left." Nora swallowed hard. She hated how easily those words found her. He stood and walked to the shelf, took down a tin cup, poured water from a clay jug. When he set it in front of her, she noticed his hands weren't shaking. Hers were. She drank anyway. After a moment, she looked around and saw a small jacket hanging by the door, patched and clumsily sewn. Too small for a grown man, too coarse for a woman. It made her pause. "You live alone?" she asked quietly. He followed her gaze. "Yes." "But that jacket." He exhaled through his nose, slow. "It belonged to my little sister." Nora's hands tightened around the cup. She didn't ask. She didn't have to. The silence between them held all the answers. Isaiah knelt again at the hearth, feeding the fire with 2 small logs. The flames brightened, throwing warm gold across the cabin. Nora's eyes stung, not from smoke, but from something deeper. "Why did you bring me here?" she asked. He didn't look at her when he answered. "Because I couldn't watch what they were doing. Not again." She opened her mouth to speak, but his next words stopped her. "I failed someone once. You don't need the details. Just know, tonight, I wasn't going to stand there and let it happen a second time." Her breath tightened, caught somewhere between gratitude, shame, and the aching disbelief that someone still cared enough to intervene. Isaiah walked toward the window, checked the latch twice, then 3 times. His movements were slow, deliberate, like a man who'd spent too long expecting danger to come at night. Nora watched him, unease sliding up her spine. "Is something wrong?" He shook his head. "Nothing right now." But the line of his shoulders said otherwise. She saw the tension there, the old fear, the old responsibility, the old ghosts pressing on, him. Outside, the valley lay still under a quiet sky. But danger didn't need noise to move. It only needed intention. Isaiah turned back toward her. "Get some rest," he said. "Morning will come fast." She nodded. The blanket he laid out near the hearth was thin, but the fire warmed the room, turning the shadows soft. When she finally lay down, her body felt heavier than she'd realized, as though the day's fear was slowly draining out of her. Isaiah moved quietly through the cabin. She heard a drawer open, pause, then close again. Curiosity tugged at her, and she lifted her head just enough to see his silhouette by the table. He held something small in his hand. A glint of silver caught the firelight. A ring. He placed it carefully on the table, next to a folded cloth. Almost like someone laying down a memory they weren't sure they wanted to carry anymore. Nora watched him from the dim, her breath slow, but far from calm. She wondered who the ring had belonged to, and why Isaiah kept it close but never wore it. She wondered if she had stepped into someone else's unfinished life. When he finally blew out the lamp, the cabin went quiet, except for the steady crackle of the fire. And far off, on a distant hill, a tiny orange ember glowed, then vanished. Like someone had been watching and finally put out their cigarette. Nora closed her eyes. Sleep did not come easily. Dawn came slow to Coal Hollow, bleeding pale gold across the valley. The frost on the grass glittered in thin, sharp lines. Inside the cabin, the fire had burned low but steady through the night. Nora woke to its final embers. Orange, tired, but still warm enough to soften the cold in her bones. Isaiah was already up. She heard the soft clink of metal, the scrape of a tin pot on the stove. When she sat up, pulling the blanket around her shoulders, he turned slightly, the early light catching the edge of his profile. "Did you sleep?" he asked. "A little." He nodded, as though that was all he expected. His shirt sleeves were rolled up, and as he moved toward the kettle, the morning light fell across his back. It revealed something she hadn't seen clearly the night before. A long, raised scar carving a pale line across his skin, disappearing beneath the shoulder seam. Nora froze. Isaiah didn't notice at first. He poured hot water into 2 cups, steam rising in slow, quiet ribbons. When he finally turned, she was still staring. His eyes tightened, not with anger, but resignation. "Go ahead," he said quietly. "Ask." She swallowed. "What happened to you?" Isaiah set the cups on the table but didn't sit. He placed a steady hand on the back of the nearest chair, bracing himself. "Some scars you earn, some you inherit. This one came from standing in front of a whip that wasn't meant for me." He didn't need to explain more. She understood enough. "It was your sister," she whispered. He tongue nodded once. A long silence filled the room. Not cold, but the kind that settles like dust over a grave you visit too often. Nora rose slowly, taking one of the chairs. Her legs still felt weak, but the fire's warmth and Isaiah's steadiness made the floor seem less unsteady. "What was her name?" she asked. "Lydia." His jaw flexed once, like the name was a blade he kept sheathed. "She was younger, braver than me. Too brave." Nora traced the grain of the wooden table with her thumb. She knew what it was to lose someone to cruelty you couldn't stop. She knew how nightmares echo long after the person is gone. "My husband," she said softly, "worked the forge. He was strong, kind, the kind of man people liked. Then the mine roof fell. They never sent enough help." Her voice tightened. "They told me to accept God's plan. Debt fell on me, and the men who held it. They didn't care if I lived or died. They cared that the numbers lined up." Isaiah lowered his eyes. Warren Pike cared even less. "He used Tommy's debt to own me." Isaiah shook his head slowly. "No. He used the law to pretend he did. That's different." Nora lifted her gaze. Isaiah didn't look away. "I told you last night," she murmured, "that you saved the wrong woman." Isaiah's brow pulled together gently. "Why would you say that?" "Because I don't have anything left. Because after Tommy died, I let myself be pulled into all the wrong hands. I didn't fight hard enough. I didn't see it coming." "Someone like you," she whispered, "shouldn't ruin his life over someone like me." For a moment, Isaiah didn't breathe. Then he knelt beside her, not close enough to frighten, just enough to meet her eyes. "Listen to me," he said quietly. "There is no someone like you. There is only what they made you believe you are." Her throat tightened. Isaiah continued, voice low, steady as a horse's breath in winter air. "You're not a mistake. You're not a burden. And you're not a debt someone can buy. You walked out of that saloon with your own feet. That matters." Her eyes burned. She blinked fast, refusing to let the tears fall. Isaiah stood and walked to the table. He picked up something. She recognized it instantly. The silver ring. Its dull glow caught the morning light. "It belonged to the woman I was going to marry," Isaiah said. "We were planning to leave this territory, start again in the north. But when the riders came for Lydia, she stayed behind to help. Didn't make it." He set the ring down gently, like laying it on sacred ground. "I kept it because I didn't know what else to do with the guilt." Nora stared at the ring, feeling the weight of 2 lives cut down before they could grow. "You don't have to tell me more," she said softly. "I think I do," he whispered. "Because if I'm going to stand between you and what's coming, you should know why." Nora's breath trembled. Before she could speak, the cabin door burst open. Micah stumbled inside, breathless, mud streaked on his boots. The boy looked between them, eyes wide, chest heaving. "Isaiah," he panted. "Sheriff's men. They put something up on the board near the well." Isaiah straightened, tension returning like an old companion. "What kind of something?" Micah swallowed hard. "A notice with your name on it." Nora felt her stomach drop. "What does it say?" Isaiah asked. Micah's voice shook. "I didn't read it all, but it looked official." The fire snapped behind them, sending a thin line of sparks upward. Isaiah reached for his coat. "Looks like we're going to town." Outside, the wind picked up, carrying the faint smell of dust and something sharper, like smoke, waiting for a chance to rise. Isaiah rode ahead with Micah close behind. Nora seated in the back of the wagon, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. The morning sun had not warmed the valley yet. Everything still felt cold, washed in a thin gray light that made the world look hollow. Red Vista grew larger with each turn of the trail. Smoke rose from a few chimneys, and the clang of a blacksmith's hammer drifted faintly through the air. But the closer they came, the tighter Nora's chest grew. She could almost feel the eyes waiting for them. The whispers. The judgment. Isaiah stopped the wagon near the town well, and there it was, a sheet of paper nailed to the board beside the pump, flapping gently in the cold breeze. Micah slid down first and ran to it. Isaiah followed, shoulders broad, jaw steady. Nora stepped out more slowly, legs stiff beneath her. She reached them just as Isaiah tore the notice free. His eyes darkened as he read it. "What does it say?" Nora whispered. Isaiah handed it to her. The ink was harsh, each stroke deep and sure. "Isaiah Cole is summoned to the office of Sheriff Harlan. Failure to appear will be considered an admission of guilt in the matter of unlawful violence resulting in death." Nora's heart stopped. "Death?" she breathed. "Who died?" Isaiah didn't answer. Micah looked between them, wide-eyed, but the question answered itself a heartbeat later. When two townsfolk walked past, murmuring, "Found Warren's boy dead near the ridge. No telling what Cole did to him. Sheriff says he was just doing his job." Nora's stomach twisted. The man who died wasn't Caleb. It was the pale, nervous one, the shadow who always followed behind. She remembered seeing him last during the storm, remembered how the ground gave way beneath him in the dark. "Isaiah," she whispered, "it wasn't your fault." "I know," he said quietly. But knowing didn't change how the town saw him, or how Harlan planned to use it. Isaiah folded the paper neatly, almost too calmly. "We'll go to Harlan." Nora stepped closer. "You don't have to." "Yes," he said, meeting her eyes. "I do." No anger in his voice. No fear. Only steady acceptance. A man who'd learned that running made everything worse. He turned to Micah. "Stay with the wagon." Micah nodded, though worry twisted his young features. "Be careful, Isaiah." Isaiah touched the boy's shoulder. Simple, grounding. Then started toward the sheriff's office. Nora moved with him. "I'm coming too." He paused. You don't owe me that. I know, she said. That's why I'm coming. He didn't argue. When they reached the sheriff's porch, Harlan stood in the doorway, arms folded, as if he'd been waiting all morning. Well now, Harlan said, voice smooth as oiled steel. Right on time. Isaiah stepped forward. I saw your notice. And I'm glad you did. Harlan motioned inside. Let's settle this like men. Nora stiffened, recognizing the phrase men like Harlan used when they wanted power, without witnesses. Isaiah didn't move. What exactly am I being accused of? Your temper got the better of you, Harlan replied. A man died. Isaiah's voice remained calm. He died from a fall during the storm. I wasn't near him. Harlan shrugged. Storms don't speak. Dead men don't either. But papers do. He tapped a thick folder on his desk, its edges smudged with dust. And the papers say there's cause to bring you in. Warren Pike stepped beside him, arms crossed, expression smug. Justice needs witnesses, Warren said. Luckily, I'm one. Nora stepped forward, shaking but steady enough. He's lying. Isaiah wasn't even close to. Harlan raised a hand. Miss Finch, your presence complicates things. You should go home. I'm not leaving him. Harlan's eyes hardened. Careful. Interference might put you on the wrong side of this. Nora's breath hitched, but she didn't back down. Isaiah touched her arm lightly. It's all right. It's not, she whispered. Harlan watched the exchange with a predator's patience. Cole, he said, I'm giving you a choice. He tapped the folder. Sign over water access to Pike's operation, just temporary, and this whole matter becomes unfortunate weather. No charges. Nora stared. That's blackmail. Harlan smiled politely. That's law. Here anyway. Isaiah looked at the folder, looked at the notice, looked at the trap. He had lost land before, lost people, lost trust in the system that pretended to protect men like him. He knew a crooked deal when he saw one. No, he said simply. Harlan blinked, genuinely surprised. No? Warren echoed. Think carefully, Cole. Isaiah shook his head once. I have. I'm not giving you my water. I'm not giving you land. And I'm not giving you her. Nora's throat closed. Harlan exhaled, disappointed. Then you leave me no choice. He reached for the iron cuffs. Nora's voice broke. Isaiah! But before the sheriff could reach him, before the cuffs could close, a voice rang out from the far end of the street. Sheriff! Sheriff, come quick! A ranch hand sprinted toward them, panting, breath jagged. One of Pike's men, he's awake! The one from last night. He's asking for you. Harlan froze. So did Warren. Isaiah turned, eyes narrowing. I thought you said he was dead. Warren's face went pale. The ranch hand bent over, catching his breath. He's alive. And he's talking. Isaiah looked at Harlan. Harlan looked at Warren. And for the first time, fear flickered across the sheriff's eyes. thin, but unmistakable. The truth was waking, and it wasn't on their side. Isaiah didn't say a word on the ride back. The wagon creaked beneath them, cutting a lonely line through the dry grass. Clouds hung low, bruised purple around the edges, like the sky itself was holding its breath. Nora kept glancing at him, wanting to speak, but afraid she might push him deeper into whatever storm he was holding inside. Micah rode beside them, gripping the reins of his pony, trying his best to look brave. When the ranch finally came into view, Coal Hollow lying quiet between two low hills, Isaiah slowed the horses and stepped down first. He looked at the dry troughs, the cracked ground where water used to run freely. His jaw tightened. "We'll dig," he said simply. Micah blinked. "Dig what?" "A new ditch," Isaiah said. "We'll pull water from the North Spring." "That spring's 3 miles off," Nora whispered. "Then we'll take 3 miles." He said it like a man who had no choice left. And maybe he didn't. They gathered shovels and headed toward the slope behind the house. The earth was stubborn, sun-baked, refusing to give itself up easily. Isaiah drove the first shovel into it, breath steady, shoulders locked. Micah followed. Then Nora, though her hands trembled around the worn handle. Hours passed. Dirt darkened their boots. Their shirts clung to their backs. The sun crawled across the sky like it didn't care who was breaking under it. From the road, 2 ranchers passed on horseback. Neither slowed, neither waved. A third rode by later. He didn't say anything, either. But he spat into the dust in front of them before riding on. Nora felt something coil in her chest. Shame, anger, fear, all tangled together. "Isaiah," she murmured, "maybe you should let me go. It's me they're after. If I leave—" Isaiah planted his shovel, leaning both hands on it. "I told you," he said. "I don't return people like cattle. But you're losing everything because of me." He shook his head. "I'm losing things because men lie. Because law bends to money." His voice dropped lower. "Because I didn't fight hard enough last time." He looked at her. Eyes steady, voice quiet. "Don't make me lose this time by walking away." Nora swallowed hard, unsure how to hold the weight of that. They kept digging until the sun dipped, leaving a red edge on the horizon. The ditch stretched long and narrow, a wound carved across the land. When Micah's shovel struck something solid, he jumped. "Isaiah! There's wood here!" Isaiah knelt, pushing the dirt aside with his hands. Nora crouched beside him. Beneath the soil lay an old plank, gray with age. Carved faintly into the wood was a family name, almost rubbed away by time. Coal Property Line, 1861. Isaiah froze. Nora lifted her eyes to him. "This ranch used to be bigger." He didn't answer. He didn't have to. She could see it in his face. Recognition, memory, anger he kept buried deep. "Harlan took this from you," she whispered. Isaiah brushed soil off the carved letters. his hands gentle in a way that made her ache. He said the fire burned too much, said the county had to reevaluate borders. I was too young to fight him. He straightened, breath tight. Turns out he wasn't shaving land. He was stealing it. Micah looked up at him wide-eyed. What do we do now? Isaiah stared into the falling dusk. Same thing we've been doing, he said. We keep digging. And they did. By the time the last light left the sky, the ditch reached almost halfway to the distant spring. Nora winced every time she flexed her fingers. Micah could barely lift his arms. But Isaiah kept moving, slow, relentless, as though the earth itself had dared him to quit. It wasn't until darkness fully settled that Nora felt the wind shift. It carried something foreign, sharp, wrong. Isaiah, she murmured, do you smell that? He stiffened. Yeah. Micah sniffed the air. Smoke? Isaiah scanned the hills. The ranch house windows glowed faintly behind them. Warm, steady, safe. But beyond the ridge, higher up, a faint orange flicker danced behind the rocks. The kind of flicker that didn't come from a lantern. Nora stepped closer to him. Someone's out there. Isaiah didn't speak, but the tension in his shoulders told her everything. Caleb's laugh rolled faintly on the wind. Low, mean, carried by the dark like a warning. Micah paled. Is that? Isaiah's voice dropped to a whisper. Back to the house. Now. As they hurried toward the porch, the flicker on the ridge brightened, swelled, stretched, like a torch raised higher. Then another torch joined it. Nora felt the cold move through her chest like water. Someone was watching their ranch. Someone who didn't intend to leave them in peace. And the night was only getting darker. The wind changed first. Sharp, restless, scraping across the valley like a warning whispered through grit. By the time Isaiah reached the porch, the night sky had turned a rough shade of red-brown. Dust rose in slow spirals, lifting higher with each gust. The lanterns around the ranch shook on their hooks, rattling like bones. A dust storm, Isaiah muttered. And a big one. Nora pulled Micah close. The boy squinted into the dark, fear twitching in his small shoulders. The wind kicked harder, flinging sand against the siding, hissing like snakes in the dark. Inside, Isaiah said. Get low. Keep away from windows. They hurried in. Isaiah barred the door, checked the shutters, tossed extra logs into the fire until the flames climbed with a low, hungry roar. Sand peppered the roof above, each grain tapping like impatient fingers. Nora knelt near the hearth, trying to calm Micah. The storm outside groaned like something alive. The air tasted of dust and iron. But under it, there it was again. Smoke. Isaiah stiffened. That ain't from the storm. The same flicker they'd seen earlier, brighter now, bloomed behind the ridge, quivering through the haze. It wasn't lantern light. It wasn't lightning. It was fire. Micah gasped. The barn! Isaiah grabbed his coat. Stay here. Nora stood immediately. No. Nora, the wind's bad. You can't. There are horses in there, and tools, and everything you've spent years holding together. She lifted her chin. I'm not sitting and listening to it burn. Something old and aching moved behind Isaiah's eyes. He didn't argue again. He handed Micah a damp cloth. Stay inside. Hide under the table if the wind breaks anything. Micah nodded shakily. Isaiah and Nora burst out into the storm. Dust swallowed them whole. Sand clawed at their faces. The wind shoved at their bodies like angry hands, nearly knocking Nora off her feet. But Isaiah's grip locked around her wrist, steady, warm, guiding her through the violent dark. They pushed forward until the barn rose through the storm, its outline wavering, flames crawling along the far side of the roof like hungry fingers. The world narrowed to heat, grit, and the pounding of their own hearts. Someone lit this on purpose, Nora shouted. Isaiah didn't look back. I know who. He kicked the barn door open. Smoke billowed out, hot and thick. The horses screamed inside, panicked. Sparks spit from the rafters. Nora covered her mouth with her sleeve. We need water. Ain't enough time. Isaiah untied the nearest stall, smacking the horse's flank so it bolted into the storm. Nora rushed to help, tugging knots with shaking fingers. A burning beam cracked overhead. Micah's voice suddenly pierced the storm. Isaiah! Nora! He'd followed them. Nora's stomach twisted. Micah, get back! Isaiah roared. Too late. Another beam crashed down. Flames, spraying, pinning the boy's legs beneath smoldering timber. Micah! Nora screamed. Isaiah lunged, shoving through smoke and fire, shouldering the burning beam. Heat bit into his skin. He didn't care. Pull him out! He shouted. Nora crawled low, grabbed Micah's arms, and dragged him out while Isaiah held the beam with every ounce of strength he had left. When the boy was clear, Isaiah shoved the beam aside and staggered back, gasping. His shoulder was blistered and raw, an ugly burn spreading across skin already scarred. Isaiah, your arm. No time. He pushed her toward the exit. Go. Outside, the wind hit them full force again. Nora nearly collapsed but forced herself upright, dragging Micah to the corral wall where the storm thinned just enough to breathe. Isaiah stumbled out moments later, eyes burning, still alert. A shadow moved in the storm. Caleb, drunk, laughing, holding a torch sputtering in the sand-filled wind. You should have stayed out of my business, Cole, he slurred. Now your whole place goes with her. Something inside Nora snapped. Not fear, not helplessness. Something clean, sharp. She grabbed Isaiah's revolver from the dirt. Her hands shook for a heartbeat, then stilled. Caleb raised the torch again. The gunshot cracked through the storm, swallowed and twisted by the wind. The bullet hit the ground inches from Caleb's boot, throwing sand up his legs. The torch fell, snuffed instantly by the raging dust. Caleb stared at Nora, shock draining the smirk from his face. Her voice didn't tremble. You don't get to burn this place. He stumbled backward, then ran into the darkness, cursing, swallowed by the storm. Isaiah stared at her through the whirling dust, eyes wide, unreadable. The barn groaned behind them, flames sputtering under choking sand. One of the horses inside cried a final, broken sound. Then the roof collapsed. The light vanished, leaving only the storm, the dark, and Isaiah's ragged breathing beside her. But the danger wasn't over. Through the storm, faint but clear, came the toll of the church bell in town. 1 strike, 2, 3, a death toll. Isaiah closed his eyes. Someone died tonight. Nora's blood ran cold, and she knew what came next. Dawn came slow, pale, and heavy, like the valley didn't want to wake after the night it had endured. Ash drifted from the charred remains of the barn, carried on a tired wind. The storm had blown itself out, leaving the land strangely quiet. Isaiah walked the perimeter alone, one arm wrapped tight against his burned shoulder. Every step looked like it cost him a piece of breath, but he didn't stop. Nora followed a few paces behind, unsure whether to speak or give him space. Micah limped beside her, leaning on a stick, boots dragging softly through the dust. The horse they couldn't save lay under a tarp near the corral. Isaiah paused beside it, lowering his head. Nora saw him blink hard once, jaw clenched. That animal had carried his burdens for years. Losing it wasn't just losing a horse. It was losing another piece of home. Nora touched his uninjured arm gently. You saved Micah. You saved all the others. Isaiah didn't look at her. Doesn't feel like saving. Micah stepped forward. Isaiah, I'm sorry. If I hadn't gone out there, Isaiah turned, and for once his voice cracked. Don't you say that. Not ever. He swallowed. You're alive. That's all that matters. The morning sun crested the ridge, lighting the back of the ranch house with washed-out gold. Nora noticed something behind the shed. Old wooden markers half hidden in the grass. She had seen them before, only in passing. Today, something pulled her toward them. Isaiah watched her walk that direction, his shoulders lowering, like he'd known this moment would come. The small burial ground sat quiet beneath a crooked cottonwood. 4 simple markers, names carved by hand, rough, uneven letters. Nora brushed dust off the nearest one. Ella Cole, 1870. A small cross burned into the corner. Isaiah, Nora whispered. He walked over slowly. She was 15. His voice sounded older than he was. My sister, sweetest person I ever knew. Nora traced the carved wood with trembling fingers. She didn't deserve. No, he said. She didn't. He crouched at the second marker. Sarah Ann Wilkes, 1871. Nora realized it was the name he'd murmured once in his sleep. My fiancé, he said softly. We were running north, thought we'd make it across the border. Men came before sunrise. He touched the marker gently. I wasn't fast enough, and I wasn't strong enough. Nora felt her throat tighten. She had known grief, but the sorrow in Isaiah's voice felt older, deeper, like it lived in the ground beneath their feet. Micah lingered near the fence, giving them space he didn't quite understand. Isaiah moved to the last marker. A plain board. No name. Only a date. 1872. "Who is this one?" Nora asked. "Someone who tried to steal cattle. He died here." Isaiah exhaled. "Folks asked if I hated him. Truth is, I never hated anybody as much as I hated myself back then." Nora's chest ached. "You don't have to carry that anymore." He lifted his gaze, meeting hers with quiet, worn eyes. "I've carried it so long," he said. "I don't know what my hands feel like without the weight." She stepped closer. "Last night, you chose differently. You didn't freeze. You didn't lose someone. You ran into fire for Micah, for me, for all of us." He looked away, jaw tight, as if the praise hurt more than the burns. "Maybe. But men like Harlan, they'll make it all count for nothing." He stared down at the graves. "Every time I try to keep something safe, I lose it." Nora touched his hand. Just a small touch, fragile and honest. "You didn't lose me." His breath hitched, and for the first time she saw something raw behind his eyes. Micah's shout broke the stillness. "Isaiah! Nora!" He pointed toward the road, panic stiff in his stance. "Someone's coming!" Isaiah rose, pain forgotten. Nora spun toward the trail. 3 riders approached, dust rising behind them like a warning flag. Even from a distance, she recognized the gleam of the sheriff's star. Sheriff Miles Harlan. And behind him, several townsfolk, all wearing grim expressions. Nora's pulse pounded. "He's coming for you." Isaiah squared his shoulders, the movement making him wince. "Then we face him." Micah limped closer. "What do we do?" Isaiah stepped in front of Nora and the boy, hands curling at his sides. "We stand." Hooves thundered closer. Harlan's face sharpened into view, stern, unreadable, with something granite hard in his eyes. Nora moved to Isaiah's side, refusing to hide. The riders slowed. The sheriff reined in just a few feet away. "Isaiah Cole," Harlan called, voice cutting clean across the yard. "We need to talk about what happened last night." Isaiah didn't flinch. "Then say what you came to say." Harlan lifted a rolled document. "There's been a death in this valley, and until the law sorts it out." He unrolled the paper with a sharp snap. "You're coming with me." The wind stilled. Even the ashes seemed to pause in the air. Nora felt her heart drop. Isaiah didn't blink. Then Harlan said the words that froze her blood. "And she is too." Sheriff Harlan stepped forward with the slow confidence of a man used to winning. Dust curled around his boots as he faced Isaiah and Nora. Warren Pike hovered behind him on horseback, smirking, like the outcome had already been written. "You're both coming with me," Harlan said. Nora stood straighter. "On what charge?" "Unlawful violence leading to death." Harlan unrolled a document. "A witness put you at the scene." Isaiah's voice stayed calm. The ridge gave way. Caleb started that fire. Caleb? Warren barked a laugh. He was nowhere near your barn. Nora felt anger rise. Fear laced through it. I saw him. Harlan lifted a hand. Enough. You can tell it to the judge. The crowd behind him murmured, half curious, half expecting a fight. Nora felt Isaiah shift beside her, steady as stone. But she saw the pain in his burned shoulder, the exhaustion in his eyes. She couldn't let him face this alone. There's something you need to see, she said. Isaiah glanced at her, confused, as she reached into her coat and pulled out a crumpled sheet she'd kept hidden since the storm. Warren froze. What's that? He demanded. Nora unfolded it, holding it high so Harlan could read. A letter to Caleb, she said, telling him to set a fire, to scare Isaiah into signing his water rights away. Harlan's jaw tightened. Nora read aloud, her voice cutting through the yard. Make it dramatic. Don't kill anyone. We only need Cole scared enough to sign. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Warren's face drained of color. It's fake! She forged. But Nora turned the page, showing the unfinished signature at the bottom. A half-written name. M. Harlan. The sheriff went still. Isaiah stepped closer. You meant to sign it. I didn't, Harlan whispered, but the guilt was already in his eyes. Warren tried again, voice cracking. Miles, don't listen to her. Quiet, Harlan snapped, sharper than Nora had ever heard him. The ranch yard went silent. Even the wind seemed to pause. Harlan stared at the letter a long moment. Then he reached for the badge on his chest and pulled it free. Slowly. He looked older suddenly, like the weight of every wrong choice had finally settled on his shoulders. I won't enforce lies, he said. Not anymore. He threw the badge into the dust. Warren reeled, panicked. Miles, what the hell are you doing? We had a deal. That deal almost killed people, Harlan said. The crowd shifted away from Warren, leaving him alone in the saddle. Rage twisted his face. This isn't over. I'll bury this ranch myself. Isaiah stepped in front of Nora. Ride, Pike. Time 400 stones before someone stops you. Warren kicked his horse and fled toward town, cursing into the wind. Micah limped forward. So, we're safe now? Isaiah didn't answer, because down the road, a ranch hand galloped toward them, waving a sealed envelope high in the air. Message from Santa Fe, the rider shouted. It's urgent! Isaiah tore it open, eyes scanning the page. His face changed. Nora felt her heart lurch. Isaiah, what is it? He lowered the letter, voice rough. This changes everything. The sun was sliding behind the western ridge when Isaiah finally lowered the letter. The last streak of light stretched across his face, catching the shock still settling in his eyes. Nora stood close, almost afraid to breathe. Micah shuffled nearer. Isaiah, what does it say? Isaiah swallowed. It says Nora's debt is void. He looked at her, voice steadying. Completely. Fraud. Coercion. Everything Warren did gets thrown out. Nora's breath caught. For a moment she couldn't speak. The weight she'd carried for years, ink, signatures, bruises, fear, seemed to lift all at once, leaving her trembling. And, Isaiah added, looking back to the letter, the land deal Harlan and Warren were setting up is dead. There'll be an investigation. Ranch boundaries will be rechecked. Nora stepped closer. Your land? Isaiah nodded. Coal Hollow stays whole, and maybe more than that. The wind eased, as if the whole valley finally exhaled. Micah grinned for the first time in days. We made it! Isaiah put a hand on the boy's shoulder. We're not finished, but we're standing. They walked back toward the ranch house, the sky shifting to soft blue-gray. The ditch they'd dug earlier stretched like a scar, but a living scar, a promise of water to come. Isaiah knelt beside it, running his fingers through the loose earth. We'll widen it tomorrow, he said. Nora knelt beside him. You really think the spring can feed the valley? It won't be easy, Isaiah replied, but nothing worth keeping ever is. She watched him, noticing how the firelight from the house touched the side of his face, softening the hard lines carved by years of loss. Isaiah, she said quietly, this ranch, it's more than land to you. It's all I have left of them, he whispered. My sister, my fiancé, the people who didn't get to finish their lives. Nora touched the back of his hand, not to comfort, but to anchor him. Maybe now it can be something new, too. He looked at her then, really looked, and something warm flickered through his guarded expression. A long moment passed, simple, still, true. Micah shouted from the porch, waving a tin cup. Water's boiling. Nora, you said you'd make that stew. She laughed softly, lighter than she expected. Guess hope makes a person hungry. Isaiah stood, offering a hand. She took it. Warm, calloused, gentle. They walked toward the cabin together. Inside, the fire was bright. Micah set bowls on the table, humming under his breath. The room felt fuller than it had the night she arrived, like the house itself had decided to breathe again. Nora ladled stew. Isaiah sat, shoulder aching, but eyes calmer than she'd seen in months. For a brief moment, she felt what life could be here. Quiet, shared, safe. But safety in the West never lasted long. Just as she placed the pot back on the stove, a sharp knock split the air. Isaiah stiffened. Micah froze. Nora's heart dropped. Isaiah rose slowly, hand drifting toward the rifle leaning by the door. He opened it, with care. On the porch stood a young courier, dusty, breathless, hat in both hands. Mr. Cole, he said, eyes darting toward Nora. This just came from Santa Fe, too. They said it's urgent. He held out another sealed envelope. Isaiah took it, fingers tightening around the paper. Nora stepped closer. Isaiah? He broke the seal, read, and the color drained from his face. "What is it?" she whispered. Isaiah lifted his eyes. Dark, shaken. "They're sending someone," he murmured. "Someone to take statements, someone with authority." He swallowed hard. "And they're not coming alone." The messenger rode off before the dust even settled, leaving the ranch wrapped in a strange, trembling quiet. Isaiah stood on the porch a long moment, the sealed letter hanging at his side. Nora watched him, hands folded against her chest, waiting for whatever truth might come next. Inside the house, Micah hovered near the table, trying not to look scared, and failing. Isaiah finally spoke. "They're sending a judge and a federal marshal." He let out a breath. "Means whatever we say, whatever we've lived through, it'll be written down for good." Nora stepped closer. "Is that bad?" "No," Isaiah said softly. "Just real." The wind rolled through the valley, cool and clean after the storm. The ditch they'd dug stretched toward the ridgeline, catching the last light of day like a thin silver vein. For the first time, it didn't look like a wound. It looked like something that belonged there. Micah tugged at Isaiah's sleeve. "Will they take her away?" Isaiah knelt, wincing at the pull on his shoulder. "Not if I'm standing between her and the door." Nora felt something warm break loose inside her. "Isaiah," she whispered, "you don't have to." "Yes," he said gently, "I do." The sun dipped, letting dusk settle over the house. Isaiah rose and walked with Nora toward the small burial ground. They stood there quietly, just long enough for the shadows to soften. "I lost too much here," he said, "but I'm not afraid of what comes anymore." Nora slipped her hand into his. "Time 700. Maybe that's what starting over feels like." He squeezed back. Just once, but enough. When they returned to the cabin, Micah had lit the lamps. Warm light spilled through the windows, glowing gold against the dark. Inside, the fire crackled. The old floorboards creaked. The air smelled of stew and smoke and something like hope. Isaiah paused on the threshold, looking in at Nora setting dishes on the table. Micah laughing at something she said. "This house feels different," he murmured. Nora looked toward him through the warm shimmer of the fire. "That's because you're not carrying it alone anymore." Isaiah stepped inside, closing the door gently behind him. Outside, the valley fell into night. But through the cabin window, one square of golden light burned steady, as if the whole world had finally offered them a place to rest. And for the first time in a long time, Isaiah believed it. Thank you for staying with this story until the very end. Out here in the Old West, where hardship and hope walk side by side, Isaiah and Nora remind us that it's never too late to find courage, kindness, or a second chance. If this tale stirred something in your heart, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Please share a comment below, your memories, your reflections, or simply how the story made you feel. And if you enjoyed this journey, please consider liking the video and subscribing. Your support means the world, and it helps keep these Western stories alive. The messenger rode off before the dust even settled, leaving the ranch wrapped in a strange, trembling quiet. Isaiah stood on the porch a long moment, the sealed letter hanging at his side. Nora watched him, hands folded against her chest, waiting for whatever truth might come next. Inside the house, Micah hovered near the table, trying not to look scared, and failing. Isaiah finally spoke. "They're sending a judge and a federal marshal." He let out a breath. "Means whatever we say, whatever we've lived through, it'll be written down for good." Nora stepped closer. "Is that bad?" "No," Isaiah said softly. "Just real." The wind rolled through the valley, cool and clean after the storm. The ditch they'd dug stretched toward the ridgeline, catching the last light of day like a thin silver vein. For the first time, it didn't look like a wound. It looked like something that belonged there. Micah tugged at Isaiah's sleeve. "Will they take her away?" Isaiah knelt, wincing at the pull on his shoulder. "Not if I'm standing between her and the door." Nora felt something warm break loose inside her. "Isaiah," she whispered, "you don't have to." "Yes," he said gently, "I do." The sun dipped, letting dusk settle over the house. Isaiah rose and walked with Nora toward the small burial ground. They stood there quietly, just long enough for the shadows to soften. "I lost too much here," he said, "but I'm not afraid of what comes anymore." Nora slipped